In the long winter night that cloaked the north like a mourner's veil, the snows lay deep across the rolling hills beyond Winterfell. Each gust of wind moaned through the gaps in the battlements like an ancient dirge, yet deep beneath the godswood, farther down than the crypts whose dust-ridden halls held the slumbering kings of winter, a silence more profound than any tomb reigned. It was a silence of earth and root, of old oaths never spoken aloud, of weirwood hearts that remembered the first men and the first blood they spilled beneath red leaves. Somewhere in that darkness a man's breath stirred. Hoarse, disbelieving, edged with pain. Eddard Stark felt the chill of stone beneath his cheek long before he opened his eyes. When he did, no torch greeted him. No moonlight slipped between crude bars. Only the faint scarlet glow of the heart tree reached him, filtered through layers of soil and root, as though the world above were no more than a fading dream. His last memory, no, the last memory that mattered, was the rasp of Sir Ilan Payne's sword leaving its scabbard, the resigned sorrow in his bones as he knelt on the steps of Baelor's Sept, and Arya's face vanishing in the crowd like a startled hare. That had been the end. He had felt it, a severing more absolute than an executioner's stroke. Yet here he lay, whole, alive, and impossibly cold. He pushed himself upright. His fingers trembled, half from weariness, half from the terrible knowledge that nothing in this place obeyed the laws of daylight. His tunic was damp, as though grave soil still clung to him, and when he lifted his hand, he saw it was coated in brown flakes that could only be dried blood. His blood. He rubbed it away, heart hammering. "Father." The voice was neither echo nor memory. It drifted to him on the bitter air, young, unmistakable, tinged with the cracked wonder of a boy who has found an impossible answer. "Bran.u." Ned staggered toward the sound. A low, earthen tunnel opened ahead, where roots knotted into arches. The walls pulsed faintly, veins of red sap like hearth fires banked low. He followed them until the passage widened into a chamber not carved by mortal tools. There the roots parted around a rough-hewn well of ice. The surface shimmered, reflecting not Ned's face but a swirl of scenes. Bran perched among windswept ramparts, fists clenched white. Robb assembling bannermen whose banners drooped sodden with sleet. Catelyn staring across a rain-lashed courtyard, lips moving in some grief-born prayer. "Bran?" Ned asked, voice cracked from thirst. The water did not answer, but the chamber's opposite wall shifted. A weirwood face emerged, carving itself from living bark. Its eyes bled sap that glowed crimson, and its mouth opened in a soundless cry. For an instant, Ned beheld 1,000 winters passing in the tree's gaze. The long night, the hammerfall of giants on frozen ground, the silent march of pale kings beneath a shattered sky. Yet, buried in that endless history lay his son, small, brave Bran, green eyes wide, threading himself through time like a sparrow darting between falling axes. A whisper filled the chamber. Not words precisely, but the ache of them, as though countless vows woven together had reached their breaking point. Ned sank to one knee. A force pressed upon him, older than House Stark, older than memory. The weight of a promise made beside a bloody bed in the Tower of Joy. The weight of honor carried like iron chains. He tried to speak, to beg whatever watching gods to show him his children, but his throat clenched. Then, the ice well shattered. A torrent of frigid water crashed outward, dousing Ned. Steam rose where it struck the glowing roots, and an image coalesced in midair. King's Landing in turmoil, wildfire smoke staining the sky, the Iron Throne Room echoing with the fury of boy kings and the whispers of pettier Baelish. Soldiers clashed in the Red Keep's courtyard, their steel flashing green-gold in the wildfire's sickly light. And sandwiched between two columns of armored knights, Arya Stark, shorter now, dressed in mud-stained leathers, eyes hardened to onyx. She moved with lethal intent, needle flicking like lightning. Ned's breath caught. Arya was alive, but forged into something fearsome. The image bled away. In its place rose the battlements of Riverrun, where Catelyn rode a warhorse, whose barding bore the direwolf and entwined Beside her, Robb Stark's face gaunt with exhaustion but alight with resolve, addressed the River Lords. Their voices reached Ned as muffled echoes. "The North remembers. King in the North." Yet Ned could see the tremor in Robb's jaw, the knowledge that war stole pieces of a man that could never be regained. The last vision was Winterfell, blackened, the keep's once proud towers plundered, servants slaughtered. Smoke rose from the rubble like a funeral shroud. Rickon's shrill cry cut through the air before dissolving into nothingness. Ned's heartbeat thundered in his ears. A sudden warmth touched his shoulder. When he looked, a girl no older than 13 stood beside him, hair the color of moonlit snow, eyes bright as emerald leaves. She was dressed in robes of dark green moss, sewn with white flowers. "You are farther from death than you believe, Lord Eddard," she said, voice lilting, almost bird-like. "Brannon has called you from the brink. His need, and the need of the North, made a path." He stared, half convinced he still dreamt on Baelor's steps. "Who are you?" "One who owes the Starks more than can be measured." She inclined her head. "A child of the forest, though I walk in many skins. Dead legends come to life." Ned closed his eyes and drew a breath so deep it stabbed his lungs. "Why bring me here?" "Because winter marches, and the realms of men fall to squabbles over chairs. Bran sees clearer than any living soul. But he is small yet. He cannot fight your battles. He can only open doors." He remembered Maester Luwin's tales of greenseers, of children whose minds wandered within roots and waters. "My boy, he did this. With help, and with cost." Her gaze fluttered to the shattered ice. "The wall's magic frays each time such power bends. It will not hold forever." Ice bit Ned's spine. Then the others. "Sleep still but fitfully. You have been gone moons, Lord Stark. Much has turned. Besternern." "My head lies in a traitor's basket," Ned whispered. "My bones shipped north in a cask of tar. How can I stand before my children?" She reached out, gently touching the dried blood on his cheek. "Flesh can mend. Bone can return. Life is a river that sometimes forks unseen." He followed her gaze to the heart tree's roots, where a gray shadow shifted. It thickened, gained height, took on the stooped form of an old man robed in raven feathers. "A three-eyed crow," Bran said once. But there were no wings here. Only a face whose sockets burned with ember-bright pupils. "This is your second birth," the apparition intoned, voice a rumble like earth cracking in frost. "Your sword was never meant for southern intrigue. Ice belongs in the north. Take it up and let the song resume the verse it lost." Ned stood, knees wavering. "I broke ice, a king's command under steel and honeyed lies. The blade is gone. The steel endures," the weirwood spirit replied. "Find the smith who wields flame and sorcery. Claim what is yours." "Doan horror." Before Ned could question further, the ground lurched. Roots snaked around his ankles, yanking him down, and the air filled with a rushing sound like wings in a storm. Darkness flooded his vision, yet within it glimmered a trail of frosted footprints leading upward, out of the chamber, through secret doors beneath Winterfell, until at last he felt real air on his face, bitter and clean as fresh fallen snow. He emerged at dawn. Pale light washed the courtyard, painting the stone walls in lavender hues. There were no servants bustling about. Winterfell felt abandoned, haunted by echoing caws of crows perched upon collapsed beams. His legs shook as he crossed the yard. Every doorway he passed gaped like a broken mouth. He found the stables burned to charcoal ribs. The armory had been ransacked, barrels of arrows spilled in frozen mud. In the godswood the heart tree still stood, limbs spread like a white spider web over the pond. Its red leaves rustled, as if greeting him. Ned sank to his knees beneath it, bowed head touching snow. Tears pricked his eyes, of gratitude, of sorrow deeper than burial. A soft crunch sounded behind him. He spun, half expecting to find the child of the forest. Instead, a direwolf, larger than any hound in the Seven Kingdoms, stepped from between the trunks. Gray wind, he thought, but this beast's fur was the smoky hue of dawn clouds. and its eyes a gentle, knowing gold. It studied him a heartbeat, then huffed, plumetail swishing. "Ghost," Ned whispered, though John's wolf was said to be albino. The direwolf padded forward, sniffed his hand, and pressed its huge head against his chest. A sob broke from him, unbidden. He threaded shaking fingers into thick fur. "As old as House Stark are you?" he murmured. "Older, perhaps." The wolf rumbled deep in its throat, a sound like distant thunder promising rain. Ned rose, wiping his cheeks. "Show me the north," he said. "Show me what I must mend." The direwolf turned, trotting to the gate collapsed by fire. Ned followed through the remnants of Winterfell's outer wall, stepping onto a road rutted by siege engines. The morning wind carried smells of ash and distant battle. Far off, ravens circled like flecks of darkness against the pearl sky. He walked until sun crept high, until his legs felt once more his own. Memories returned, Robb riding south to war, Sansa in the poisonous corridors of the Red Keep, Jon at the wall staring into a horizon none could bear. Those memories stabbed, but they guided him like stars. At midday he reached a rise overlooking a sprawling encampment pitched beside the King's Road. Armored men sharpening blades, smiths hammering rusted rivets, banners snapping, gray direwolf, gold lion, flayed man. At the camp's heart, a smithy belched smoke thick as raven feathers. "Valyrian steel endures," the weirwood spirit had said. He found the edge of the camp unguarded, its sentries clustered nearer the command pavilion where arguments rose. He slipped between tents, voice low to any who hailed him. A sellsword come seeking coin. His beard was overgrown, shot through with iron, grime masked noble features. Few spared him a second glance. Within a smithy forge, sparks danced amber in gloom. The smith, broad-shouldered, bald, raised a hammer over a glowing bar. Ned's gaze fixed on the anvil, twin black lengths laid together, edges lined with molten orange. They were Valyrian, unmistakable. Idas halves reforged into two swords, one great, one slim. The great sword's fuller shimmered, a river of midnight. The slim blade, more elegant, still cooled in oil. "Put those down," Ned said before reason could still his tongue. The smith glowered. "And who are you, prating into my forge?" "Those blades belong to House Stark." Ned stepped closer, the heat searing his skin. "They were forged from ice." "You mean your mountain of a sword?" A deep laugh. "Belongs to House Lannister now. The lion pays." Ned's hand closed instinctively about a discarded hammer. "I am Eddard Stark." The smith's mirth curdled. He searched Ned's face, doubt warring with terror. "Lord Stark is dead." "Beyond question," Ned agreed. "Yet still I stand. Call your paymaster if you doubt." Clamoring outside announced armored feet. The pavilion's flap whipped aside. Jaime Lannister strode in, gold armor gleaming even in the forge's bloody light. His smirk froze at the sight of Ned Stark alive and unbound. "Seven hells," Jaime breathed. "Did the Starks learn necromancy at last?" Ned hefted the hammer. "Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail you named them. Would you raise those swords against their own father?" "Father? Yours, perhaps?" Jaime's green eyes narrowed. "But I fancy myself free of fatherly judgments." Behind Jaime, steel rasped as guards drew blades. Ned eased into stance. "No quarrel with these men," he called. "This is between lions and wolves alone." "Lions devour wolves," Jaime said. "And wolves tear out the throats of lions that forget the taste of fear." They circled. The forge roared. Ned felt the years in his joints, the faint stagger of his balance, but also a purpose as sure as winter sunrise. Jaime lunged. Ned parried with the hammer's haft, sparks licking their faces. Outside, shouts erupted. Soldiers sprawling, a gray shape weaving among them with silent fury. The direwolf crashed through the pavilion flap, jaws red. Jaime faltered. Ned seized the moment, swinging the hammer to shatter the chain securing Oathkeeper's pommel. The greatsword toppled off the anvil into his grasp. Its weight was half what ice once was, yet the Valyrian steel hummed like wind in Deerwinter pines. He raised it. Jaime met the blade with his own, but the force jarred him backward. He closed again, golden armor clanking, but Ned moved with grim economy, turning each strike aside, hunting openings. Sparks whirled like fireflies. Their duel spilled into the camp street. Men scattered. Horses reared. Ned's lungs burned. The world narrowed to Jaime's cunning grin, the hiss of steel. At last Jaime overcommitted to a thrust. Ned sidestepped, sweeping Oathkeepers flat across Jaime's helm. The Kingslayer dropped to one knee, dazed. "Yield," Ned ordered. Jaime coughed. Golden hair matted with soot. "Kill me, and prove the rumors true. That Starks know only grudges." Ned rested the Valyrian blade at Jaime's throat. "You misunderstand. I mean to end grudges." He handed the sword's hilt, his own stolen heirloom, to a stunned Stark bannerman who had followed the direwolf's carnage. "Carry this to Robb Stark. Tell him his father lives." The soldier's eyes widened. "Aye, aye, my lord." Ned turned back to Jaime. "Return to your sister. Tell her winter no longer divides itself among petty crowns. Tell her Winterfell stands, and the North will brook no further war upon its soil." Nemguntarmta. Jaime spat blood. "She will respond with fire. Then I will meet her in snow," Ned said. The direwolf pressed at his side. Ned stroked its ruff. Beyond the camp, the sky had darkened. Clouds, heavy with snow, advanced from every horizon as though drawn to the clash of cold iron and hot blood. Ned looked south, where the Kingslayers and Oathbreakers gathered like crows at a battlefield's edge, and north, where the true enemy stirred behind a wall on the verge of breaking. He sheathed the half-sword in a plain scabbard offered by the smith, whose hand still shook with disbelief. "I must see my children," Ned murmured to the wolf. "Gather the pieces left by war, before night falls entire." The wolf growled agreement. They headed northward first, for home still burned behind his eyelids. Each mile seemed layered with years stolen from him by dungeons and pyres. Yet with every step Ned felt the land itself quicken. As if the ancient spirit he glimpsed beneath the heart tree rode the winds, knitting ice and shadow into a cloak about his shoulders. The chill no longer bit. It braced. The world was sharpening for some final reckoning. 2 days' ride brought them to the ruins of Moat Cailin, where marshes steamed in perpetual fog. There a column of ironborn prisoners trudged in chains, escorted by gray-cloaked Northmen. Ned hailed their leader, a gaunt man scarred across one cheek. Galbart Glover. Recognition lit the man's eyes like dawn on steel. "Lord Stark," he whispered. "I live, though death claims me yet." Ned dismounted. "Where rides the young wolf?" "South. Hunting lions still. He presses hard on the Westerlands." Glover's gaze flicked to the wolf at Ned's heel. "And Queen Caitlin rides east, to parley with the lords of the Narrow Sea." Ned's heart clenched. Every moment his family scattered farther, chasing vengeance he had once sworn to avoid. He nodded thanks, and pressed on, riding day and night until the direwolf slowed, ears flattening at distant thunder. They crested a ridge above a broad river valley. Fires flecked the dusk below. The aftermath of battle. Ned slid from the saddle, stumbling through churned mud and the stench of death. Fallen banners lay trampled. Golden lion, red-eyed trout, gray direwolf. He knelt by a Northman whose lifeblood soaked his surcoat. The soldier clutched Ned's wrist. "King Robb rode east to pay for this slaughter." He gasped, then fell silent. Ned closed the man's eyes. His grief hardened to resolve. The war had fractured beyond simple disputes of crown and fealty. It fed on fear and pride, leaving children orphaned, fields burned bare. He could not mend it sword in hand alone. He would need a voice that carried north wind into gilded halls where queens plotted. A crack echoed across the valley. Ned looked up. On the far bank, crimson flames licked skyward from a pyre of wagons soaked in pitch. Silhouetted before it, a woman on horseback raised a torch. Auburn hair whipping, grief carved deep into her profile. "Caitlin, Dot." Ned's world tipped. Without thought he splashed into the river, icy current battering him. Helmets and shields drifted past like drowned moons. He clawed the far shore, gasping. Caitlin had already turned her mount, riding for the tree line. He shouted, voice ragged. She did not slow. He ran, mud sucking his boots, until he collapsed. The direwolf bounded ahead, intercepting the frightened horse. Caitlin reined in, eyes wide. Back, beast, she cried, dagger flashing. Cat, Ned croaked. Her head snapped toward him. She stared, disbelief warring with pain. The torch dropped from her fingers. She slid from the saddle, knees buckling as she reached him. Her hands hovered over his face, terrified to touch, lest he vanish like smoke. Ned, her whisper broke. They told me. They showed me your bones. I escaped the bones, he said. The head was never mine to give. She touched his cheek. Warm tears streaked mud and ash. Then she embraced him, sobs shaking them both. The direwolf sat sentinel, golden eyes solemn. When words returned, they came halting. Of Bran's fall, of Theon's betrayal, of Robb's victories, and the cost paid in Sons of the North. Ned listened, each tale cutting deeper. Yet through grief he saw a path. If he could rally his children, forge their scattered strengths, they might yet steer the realm from ruin. But first they must believe in miracles, as he now did. Night descended. They built a small fire, wary of scouts. Caitlin watched Ned burn the crusted rags he had worn since his resurrection. She wrapped him in a spare cloak, stark gray lined with fox fur. Tomorrow we ride to River Run, she said, voice steadied. Robb marches west, but he will answer our ravens. When the North sees you breathe, every oathbreaker will quake. It is not fear I seek, Ned replied, staring at the flames. Only silence for the dead, and refuge for the living. He remembered the heart tree's warning. The wall's magic phrase. Each day spent chasing southern crowns allowed winter's true enemy to gather. He must guide his family to that higher purpose. Dawn found them already mounted. The direwolf scouted ahead, a spectral guardian. They kept to forest trails, bypassing Lannister patrols. Word spread nonetheless. A whisper carried by spared farmers and wide-eyed children. Lord Eddard walks. By the time they reached the Red Fork, villages lit beacons in defiance of lion banners. River Run's towers rose above misty water like ancient claws. Gates opened at their approach. Sir Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, strode across the drawbridge. He stopped dead at sight of Ned Stark, then barked a laugh of sheer astonishment. "Seven save us, cat," he said, clasping Ned's forearm. "You mean to break the stranger's own ledger?" Inside, courtiers stared as though at ghostly vengeance made flesh. Ned bore their gawking with grim patience. He washed days of grime away, trimmed his beard, accepted garments of dark wool stitched with direwolf sigils. In the solar he met Edmure, new-made Lord of Riverrun with wearied eyes, who swore fealty once more, cheeks flushed with shame at past follies. But it was the quiet chamber overlooking the river where Ned stood longest. There, pinned upon a map, speckled with counters, lay a swift iron marker indicating Robb's host. It crept toward the mountains of the moon, where Lysa Arryn hoarded her knights like grain in famine. "I ride to my son," Ned said. Caitlin touched his hand. "Robb will come to you. Send ravens and wait." "Damacy." "I cannot wait." He remembered Arya's hardened gaze. Sansa's silence forged in fear. Bran's lonely vigilance in the roots of the world. "Too many threads fray. I must bind them." A rustle sounded. Maester Vyman entered, a sealed scroll trembling in his grip. "A raven from the wall, my lord. Urgent." Ned took it. The wax bore the direwolf of House Stark, inflected with the black field of the Night's Watch. He broke it open. Jon's hand scrawled across the parchment. Swift, terse lines describing dead men rising. A fist of corpses broke into shards of ice that crawled still. The horn at Eastwatch sounding thrice, though no ranger returned. Ned's knuckles whitened. "News from my brother?" Caitlin asked. "From my son." He folded the parchment. "The wall bleeds." Silence chilled the chamber. Outside, the warrior's star climbed the early night sky, pale and sharp. Ned closed his eyes, feeling again the heart tree's ancient power. Robb fights lions, he said softly, while the dead rally in dark woods. We quarrel over crowns while the others unmake the world. Benimea. He opened his eyes, firelit and clear. No more. The War of Thrones ends now. Catelyn studied him, the grief-worn lines of her face softening with new resolve. She nodded. Then we must gather every house that remembers the old vows. River and north, vale and hill, mountain and marsh. We must stand as the first men stood, or perish. Ned clasped her hand. I will ride to Robb, to Arya, to Sansa. I will bring them home. Together we march for the wall. Together, she echoed. In the courtyard below, the direwolf lifted its muzzle, and a howl rose into the night. Long, haunting, fierce. Torches flickered along Riverrun's walls as men paused to listen, hearts stirring with instinct older than banners. Ned Stark turned from the window, the hearth's glow carving harsh lines upon his face. He donned a cloak of midnight wool, clasped with a single wolf-head brooch of dark iron. The weight felt right, as though each link had been forged from the oaths he had once sworn, broken, and sworn anew. Outside, snowflakes drifted despite the southern latitude, spiraling through air heavy with portent. Ned stepped into them, head unbowed. Every flake that touched his brow seemed to whisper, "Winter walks beside you. Remember." He would remember. He would gather his pack. And when the snows of the final winter blanketed the fields of men, he would stand upon the wall, sword of his fathers in hand, and answer darkness with the light of honor reborn. But first he must teach the living to lay down their grief-fueled blades before the dead claimed them all. Ned Stark mounted his horse. The direwolf bounded ahead, white breath billowing. Catelyn rode at his side, her eyes fixed on the road that led to sons and daughters in peril. And behind them, in the flickering torchlight of Riverrun's gatehouse, soldiers whispered of an impossible return, of a ghost come north to save the realms of men. They would have 5 hours, 5 days, perhaps 5 heartbeats before the realm's fractures widened beyond all hope. Yet Ned felt the steady drum of his pulse, measured and sure. For the first time since the Tower of Joy, he carried no secret heavier than truth itself. Truth, like Valyrian steel, might yet cut a path through chaos. The road unrolled before them into shadowed distance. Snowflakes melted on Ned's glove, leaving silver threads that shimmered in the torchlight, a weaving of past and present, of death and life. He urged his mount into a gallop. The night swallowed them, but the howl of the direwolf echoed, promising dawn. Gaw, gaw. The wind knifed along the Red Fork as Ned and Catelyn rode east, the river's dark water glimmering like hammered steel beneath a veiled moon. With them traveled 20 of Riverrun's swiftest outriders. Quiet men draped in gray cloaks, who bore no banners, and spoke only when necessary. Their orders were simple. Keep pace, keep watch, and let no word of Eddard Stark's return reach Lannister ears until the young wolf himself had laid eyes upon his father. Even so, rumors traveled on crows' wings and rustling leaves. Ned felt them in every whisper of branches overhead, in the wary glances of farmers startled awake by hoofbeats. A ghost in wolf's skin stalks the Riverlands, the stories would say by dawn. A ghost come to pass judgment. They slept little, pressing day and night through woodland tracks. Catelyn set the cadence, urgent but measured, never wasting the horses, never allowing Ned to ride alone at the point. At dusk of the 3rd day, they reached a narrow ford where mist hovered above the waters like curling breath. The vanguard slowed, wary, for sign of ambush shimmered in every shadow. Trampled reeds, torch scars on alder trunks, the faint stink of charred flesh. Ned swung down, knelt, and touched a patch of blood-dark soil. 3 days, he murmured, rubbing the flakes between thumb and forefinger. Perhaps 4. A rear-guard action most like, said Sir Desmond Mallister, the senior outrider. The dim lantern he carried threw sharp angles across his gaunt cheeks. Lannisters fell back toward Pink Maiden. We've seen their banners hurrying west of here. Robb's doing, Ned said, though his voice carried no triumph. Each mile of lion bones on the road marked sons never to return. We press on. They led the horses across the ford in silence. The river lapped cold about Ned's boots, soaking the wool above his greaves. Midstream, something pale bumped his knee. An antlerless stag, bloated, throat ragged with crossbow quarrels. It drifted past, turning a blind eye to the sky. Caitlin's gaze found the carcass, and held it until the current swept death downstream. Past midnight, they reached the village of Hivewatch. 20 huts circled round a lichen-crusted sept. Empty windows stared like lost eyes. Doorways sagged inward, black as abandoned coffins. A Wheatsheaf flag of House Derry hung shredded from the sept's bell tower. The air reeked of soured ale and something fouler. Ned dismounted in the yard, the direwolf padding by his side, its breath ghosting between broken pews. Inside they found the villagers. 27 men, women and children huddled beneath the mother's cracked statue. Most bore wounds hastily wrapped in linens dyed russet with dried blood. A gray-haired matron rose as Ned approached, fear and hope warring in the set of her chin. When she saw the direwolf, she paled, but Ned eased forward, palms open. "We want no harm," he said. "Tell us who did this." "Reynard Riker," the woman rasped, with lion men riding his flank. "Said we fed Stark banners, though knots passed our village but corpses. These 2 turns of the moon. Now Sundar." Ned closed his eyes. His dreams of a realm rescued from Southron intrigue felt fragile as spun glass. He knelt and took the woman's hand. "You'll have food and leeches for the wounded. When dawn breaks, we ride for the twins. My bannermen there will protect any who wish to flee behind their walls." "Lord Stark," she whispered, recognition flooding her gaze like thawing ice. Tears slipped down her grime-streaked cheeks. "They said you were dead." "So they did." He squeezed her hand, then rose. "But winter walks with long shadows. Fear not their length. Fear only the cold if we forget each other." They left supplies. Half their remaining salt pork, poultices from River Run, and 2 of Mallister's riders to shepherd the survivors north. When Ned remounted, Caitlin's eyes reflected torchlight and unspoken pride. Yet no comfort dulled the iron in her voice when she spoke. "We are fewer now," she said. "Yet speed may save hundreds by sparing Robb another clash." Ned nodded and spurred on. Royal. Robb Stark stood on a wind-whipped escarpment overlooking the burning fields of Ashmark, rain striking sparks off the battered crown circlet that rested askew upon his unruly auburn curls. Beneath him, columns of Northmen trudged through mud the color of fresh liver. Some sang, voices hoarse. Most simply marched, too numbed by the rout to rejoice. They had cracked the lion's flank, broken Sir Forley Prester's lines, and driven the gilded host half a day's ride west. Yet the cost weighed heavier than the soaked wool of his cloak. Lord Karstark's eldest lay in a fevered sleep from a gut wound no maester could mend. 3 Mormonts were missing, last seen beneath a forest of lancepoints. And a Raven Tree bannerman had caught an arrow through the gullet after Robb ordered a reckless charge to seize the ford. Was I father's son, he wondered, or some green boy chasing songs of glory? Lightning split the sky, stark against the smoke of flaming granaries. A memory of his father's voice, gentle but firm, spoke in his head. War is not glory, Robb. War is mothers weeping for sons. Remember that when you draw your sword. A horn sounded at the foot of the hill. Gray wind bounded from a thatch of pines to meet his master, yellow eyes hot with urgency. Behind the direwolf rode Mage Mormont, soaked armor clanging. She swung down, rain sluicing from her bearskin cloak, and strode to Robb. "A rider from the east," she said without preamble. "Claims he carries a gift past price. More prisoners." Robb's voice scraped with fatigue. "Not lion spawn, no." Her hard eyes softened, a sight rare as midsummer snow. "The man bears a sword of dusk-hued steel, and a name. Demne." Robb's hand tightened on the pommel of his longsword. "Bring him." Moments later, the rider knelt at Robb's feet, helm tucked beneath one arm. His cloak was tattered, his cheeks blackened with trail soot. But the object cradled across his forearms blazed beneath every flash of lightning. Valyrian steel, forged no later than the Doom, honest and terrible. The sigils etched upon its fuller. Wolf heads howling amid curling frost stole Robb's breath. "My king," the man said, voice thin with exhaustion. "I am Corin of Lastharth. I rode 5 days without cease from a forge camp on the Red Fork. There I found Lord Eddard Stark, alive." The word rippled through the onlookers like a quake. "He bade me place this in the hand of his son." Robb knelt, reverent, and accepted the sword. The weight felt familiar, though he had never touched it before. A limb, once severed, restored to the body. He traced one calloused thumb along the rippled edge. Ice reborn. Tears threatened. He battled them down. "My father lives," he said aloud, testing the words. The storm answered with a rolling peal, as if the sky itself affirmed the miracle. Robb rose, held the sword high. Rain hissed on the black fire of Valyrian steel. "The lions will hear of this," Mage murmured beside him. "Their courage will curdle." "It is not lions I mean to hearten or to terrify," Robb replied. He turned to his bannermen gathering in the gloom. Glover with arm in sling, Tallheart leaning on a blood-spattered spear, the Greatjin grinning through a split lip. "Send ravens. Every holdfast, every watchtower. Tell them the Wolf of Winterfell walks again." "Naipia." "And what of our campaign?" demanded Lord Bolton's steward, sour and sharp. "We stand a day from the Golden Tooth. Another push could bring Lannisport to heel." Robb lowered Ice's shimmering length. "We march east. To meet my father, we march." The steward bridled, but Meg's growl silenced him. Robb clapped Corin's shoulder. "Your horse. Ride with me at the van. I would hear every word you carry." Grey wind loosed a howl that rippled down the dark valley, setting coyotes into answering yips. Fires guttered, and in the colliginous space between one heartbeat and the next, Robb felt the great wheel of the world shift, subtle as frost forming on glass, yet undeniable. For the first time, since news of Eddard Stark's death had shattered his boyhood, the North's young king believed the realm might still be mended. Esmerinske, far south, past charred orchards and trampled vineyards, a lone girl moved through a world of night watch glimmers, lanterns in misty alleys, hearth light leaking from shutter cracks, cat eyes reflecting in gutters. Arya Stark kept to the edges of firelight, slipping from shadow to shadow like a half-grown wraith. The streets of Bitterbridge had grown dangerous after sunset. Gold cloaks patrolled in pairs, searching wagons, overturning beggars' pallets, sniffing for traitors. They would not find the Stark wolf tonight. She wore a dyer's hooded smock stiff with indigo, her hair hacked short, her cheeks streaked with ash rubbed from a brazier outside a tavern. Behind the dye works, she tapped twice on a warped door. Then, thrice fast. Iron bolts rasped, the door opened a crack. "Tit or thief?" hissed a voice. "Neither," Arya answered. "Needle." Dot. The door swung wide. Angi the archer ushered her into a cellar, pungent with wet wool and sour wine. Lemon Cloak lounged near a barrel, snoring through a beard matted with drink. Thoros of Myr bent over a rough plank table, where parchment maps were weighted by empty mugs. "You're late." His wine-ravaged eyes flicked to the bundle beneath Arya's arm. "But I smell chicken. All is forgiven." She tossed him a paper-wrapped parcel. Cooks at the Har's Head were talkative. "They say soldiers on the King's Road claim Lord Stark walks again." "How?" Thoros shook greasy locks from his brow. "Dead men walking? We've seen worse." "This is different," Arya said fiercely. The cellar's single candle guttered, throwing tremulous shadows across her sharp features. "They say he rides with a direwolf big as a warhorse, that he freed a village on the Red Fork." Prattle of smallfolk. Lem stirred, voice thick. "Next they'll say Robert crawled from his grave to Guzzlebore again." Arya fixed him with a glare sharp enough to draw blood. "I'd know if it was a lie." Angi leaned on his longbow. "Child has wolf's ears. Heard her singing back in Hollow Hill when the crows yet slept." Thoros unwrapped the parcel and tore off a drumstick. "Ears or no, rumor can be spear tip or shield." Might make Lannisters jumpy. Arya snatched the maps. If my father lives, he heads for the twins to meet Robb. I'm going there. Slow yourself. Thoros licked grease from his thumb. We still have prayers to whisper over a certain lord's purse strings in this town. Stuff your prayers. Arya's voice cracked. She pulled needle, its thin blade glinting blue. I've lingered too long already. Every day I waste is another day Sansa suffers in King's Landing. Another day Joffrey breathes. Lem rose, towering, cloak brushing ceiling beams. We're not escorting babes to their wet nurses. You leave alone. I left alone the day they killed my father, she spat, though her heart slammed in her chest. Arya had walked many leagues without companions before, but never with hope this sharp inside her ribs. It stabbed worse than fear. Angai's sigh rattled the candle flame. I'll see her past the pickets. Thoros shook his balding head, but Arya was already strapping needle to her back. She ducked through a side tunnel smelling of fresh earth, climbed slick steps into an alley wreathed in fog, and slipped away, Angai's soft tread following. Behind them Thoros shouted something about fires of destiny, but Arya heard only the pounding of her own blood. Northward, northward, always home. At Winterfell, moonlight made ghosts of collapsed walls. Snow drifted through holes in broken roofs, settling on trunks of charred apple trees, on skeletal beams rising like ribs from ash. No living men walked these ruins tonight, yet in the Godswood Bran Stark breathed, his body curled within the bowl of uprooted roots, eyes blank as milk. Around him fireflies danced, though it was midwinter, their lights pulsing with uncanny rhythm. Summer the dire wolf lay guard, hackles pricked, sensing things the human eye could not pierce. Bran's mind soared on cold winds, wings invisible. He flew above the Red Fork, smelling horse sweat and lightning. He flew above Ashmark, tasting blood iron and burnt wheat. He flew to the wall, where crackling wards sighed in pain each time the white wind clawed. And he flew beyond, into a sky unmarked by constellations men knew, where dead things marched and the night itself chanted. The three-eyed spirit guided him, its whisper woven of roots and ravens. Look to the broken places, little green seer. Mend what was severed. Bind wolf to dragon, dragon to wolf. The dawn is forged from strange alloys. A surge of dread hurled Bran back into flesh. He gasped, body trembling. Summer whined. Somewhere above the keep, an owl screeched, sudden and raw. Bran laid a shaking hand upon the direwolf's muzzle. Father is near, he whispered. We must hold fast. The heart tree's face wept silent, sap tears that glowed like embers in starlight. Guntree. King's Landing steamed beneath a sun too warm for late autumn. The festivities of a false victory over northern traitors still lingered. Colored banners fluttering over Flea Bottom, acrobats tumbling on street corners, and hogs roasted on spits outside alehouses reeking of cheap saffron. Yet none of the gaiety penetrated the stifling chambers of the Red Keep, where Sansa Stark knelt before the high lattice-barred window of her room, fingers tight around the edge of the sill. Beyond the city walls, the black water flowed, stained green in places where wildfire barrels had sunk and burst during Stannis assault seasons past. Sail banners drifted lazily, kraken gold, seahorse green. From somewhere, faint on the wind, a singer's lute carried the chords of courteous Callum and his clever crone. A body too vulgar for a maiden. Sansa barely heard. Her mind repeated a whisper spread by washerwomen and stable boys alike. Lord Stark rides. Lord Stark rides. She dared not believe. For months she had cut herself upon hope, each rumor of Robb's triumph, each lie of Joffrey's kindness. Yet this whisper felt different, stubborn as a burr, impossible to shake. In the small hours, she caught herself smiling, imagining father sweeping through Maegor's holdfast wrapped in ashes and snow, eyes stern, voice gentle. I have come, little bird. Pack your songs, we fly north. Her reverie shattered as the door banged open. Ser Meryn Trant entered, blank of expression. Behind him minced Queen Cersei in a gown of green silk, whose sleeves trailed like creeping vines. Her eyes glittered with interest too sharp to hide. Your Grace, Sansa murmured, rising, smoothing her plain wool skirts. Cersei advanced until their faces were inches apart. "Sing for me, Stark. I've no voice fit for court this day." The queen's smile cut. "You will sing the maiden's farewell, starting with the verse where the maiden learns her betrothed still lives." Fingernails traced Sansa's cheek like claws. "Sing it sweet." Sansa's throat clamped, but she began, eyes unfocused, voice trembling. The song told of a girl freed from despair by news born on a raven's wing. As she sang, Cersei watched like a cat, savoring a bird's dying flutter. When the final note faded, the queen turned away. "Rumors bloom like summer weeds," she said to Sir Meryn. "Cut them to the root. Hang tongues on the gates if you must." "Yes, your grace." Trant bowed and left, boots clanking steel on stone. Cersei faced Sansa again. "Your father is dead, little dove. He cannot save you." "Nebunatari. Saviors come in many guises," Sansa whispered, surprising herself. Cersei's hand shot out, gripping Sansa's chin. "Remember your place. When the Northern Rebellion falters, you will wed my son, and the realm will watch you birth lions. Pray for that day." She released her with a shove and swept out, leaving the door gaping. Sansa sank to the marble, heart hammering. Her lips still tingled where Cersei's nails had pressed. Yet beneath the tremor of fear, a steadiness settled. The maiden's song, once finished, carried another verse seldom sung in courts. The maiden who heeds her betrothed's true call, who takes up a blade and steals away in dawn's gray mantle. Sansa hummed that forbidden verse now, so softly no guard might hear. "I may be a bird," she thought, "but even caged birds learn how to slice the wind." Era. At Eastwatch by the sea, Jon Snow trudged atop the frozen curtain wall, cloak snapping like old sailcloth, mind aching from lack of sleep. Petrol torches sputtered in sleet. Beyond them the haunted forest stretched, branches clattering. Somewhere out there a horn had sounded thrice 6 nights past, and the ranger who blew it had not returned. Since then, ravens had raced south to every lord with the mark of honor, begging aid. Few answers had come, and fewer men. He paused where Maester Harmune knelt, applying boiled leather patches to cracked runestones embedded in the parapet. The wall glimmered faintly under the Maester's lantern, oily light revealing vein-like fissures. "Will your tar hold?" Jon asked. "For a week, perhaps." Harmune's hands shook. The runes were never meant for such strain. "The magic in this ice is old, Lord Snow. Older than Maesters have words." "Nil, Ende." Jon stared into the dark. Ghost padded soundlessly at his side. "Hackles high. Then we must mend the wall in flesh and steel." A shout rose from the inner yard. Jon hurried down the creaking stairs. By the stables, a great winged raven flapped in agitation upon a perch. A stable boy thrust a parchment into Jon's hand. The seal was gray wax impressed with a wolf's head over crossed trout and kraken. Sigil of Riverrun merged with Winterfell. Jon's breath misted as he broke it. The script was unmistakable. "To my son at the end of the world," it began. "The wall calls, and the north answers. Hold, Jon Dotto. Hold with every bone and breath. I ride with Robb and all the strength I can gather. We will reach you before the dead. Until then, send word of your needs. Ice rides to meet ice. Eddard Stark." Jon closed his eyes, dizzy. 1,000 emotions flooded him: relief, disbelief, dread. He gripped the parchment so tightly it wrinkled. "Lord Commander." Dolorous Ed's voice intruded. "Is that doom or deliverance?" "Both," Jon said softly. He looked up at the night sky where no stars dared shine. "Light every beacon. Gather all timber, all pitch. The Starks ride." "I can." Ned and Catelyn reached the twins amid slashing rain just ahead of dawn's gray wash. The frigid moat churned beneath the drawbridge. Above, crossbowmen leaned from crenellations, squinting into torch flare. Ned pulled back his hood, letting the guards see his face. Cries erupted, some of awe, others of fear. Then the gates groaned open. Inside, sergeants hustled along the walls. shepherding half-armored spearmen toward the yard's bonfires. Walder Frey's fourth son, Sir Jared, met them at the keep's arch, jaw slack. "Lord Stark," he croaked. Ned wasted no courtesy. "Rouse your father. Tell him guessed right must surpass old grudges. The young wolf comes and winter with him." Sir Jared's mouth worked soundlessly. He turned and fled. They waited in a hall where drafts blew through every crack, though tapestries tried to veil the chill. Catelyn stood with arms folded, eyes fixed on the doorway, as though willing the years of insult to crumble. Ned's direwolf prowled, nose to rush-strewn floor, growling low at stale scents of rot and urine. When Walder Frey entered, borne in a chair by 4 grandsons, his expression twitched between outrage and calculation. "Back from the grave, is it?" His voice rasped like parchment tearing. "Next we'll see dragons hatch from dinner plates." "Stranger things have hatched in these halls," Ned said. "I did not come to wag tongues. Robb marches with 10,000 men. Open your gates and mend your broken vows, or stand aside and rot with the lions." Walder's rheumy eyes flicked to Catelyn, whose silence burned hotter than any tirade. The old lord of the crossing licked cracked lips. "Guessed right then," he muttered. "Bread, salt, and safe passage. But no songs, Stark. Your voice would curdle milk." "Milk sours on war's breath," Ned replied. "Yet we shall drink water and survive." A small girl, one of Walder's innumerable great-granddaughters, brought bread and a wooden bowl of salt. Ned tore the heel, dipped it, and for the first time tasted salt on the tongue as a covenant reborn. The girl watched wide-eyed. Ned offered her a gentle nod. "Remember this moment, little Frey. Let it beat louder than betrayal." Outside thunder rolled. From the parapets trumpets sounded. A host approached from the west. Ned strode to the battlements. Across the causeway banners advanced through curtains of rain. Grey direwolf on white, bare rampant, sunburst of the Karstarks. At their head rode Robb Stark beneath a ragged makeshift canopy. Ice reborn strapped across his back, grey wind loping before. When father and son's gazes met across the moat, time collapsed. The years of separation, Winterfell snows, Riverland's fires, King's Landing chains, fell away. Others on the battlements would later swear the storm stilled, just for a heartbeat, as if weather itself bent knee. The drawbridge lowered. Ned descended, boots echoing on slick boards. Grey wind reached him first, massive head thrust against Ned's ribs, tail threshing like a furious banner. Ned laughed. Rough with tears, knelt to embrace the beast. When he stood, Robb slid from his saddle and strode forward. They clasped forearms, then pulled each other close. "Father," Robb breathed, voice breaking. "My son." Ned's hand cupped the back of Robb's wet head. "You have carried the North with honor heavier than any crown, yet you need not bear it alone." Robb drew a shaking breath. "Will the realm believe?" "They will see." Ned looked at the assembled soldiers. Young men who had followed a boy king into fire, old men who had buried lords and sons alike. "I stand." That is all the proof required. Behind Robb, Mage Mormont bowed, face unreadable. Great John Umber pounded his chest and roared wordless approval. Even Bolton's pale steward inclined his head, though his eyes glinted like frost on steel. Walder Frey appeared on the bridge, skin gray in dawn's thin light. "Enough gawping. Get your wet wolves inside my yard before they drown my causeway." Robb laughed raggedly. Ned clasped his shoulder. Together, they crossed the threshold, direwolves pacing flank to flank. In that moment, Ned felt the pack knit. It was not complete, for Arya, Sansa, Bran, Rickon, Jon, and even broken Theon inhabited pieces of his heart. But it was strong again. Strong enough, perhaps, to face the night gathering beyond ice and shadow. It hemmed. As the storm cleared, a ragged half-circle of lordlings filled the twins' great hall. Fires blazed in tripods. Spitted boar dripped fat. Yet the mood held no revel. Tension coiled like a viper between every toast. Walder Frey perched on his throne seat, sour as curdled cream, while his sons eyed the Starks as if waiting for proof. The old wolf cast a reflection. Ned rose, cloak settling about him like gathering dusk. I will speak plain. The war of 5 kings is folly. Crowns forged in blood melt before winter's wind. The true enemy is north, and it comes for all. Lion and wolf, kraken and trout, Frey and umber alike. Now, murmurs. Some scoffed, others looked away, remembering tales their grandsires muttered over mead. Ned continued. We march for the wall. Any house that joins us will share in the dawn. Those who hinder us will share ice. He let the words sink, then lifted a carved horn. To the night's watch, shield that guards the realms of men. Robb lifted his cup second. Walder Frey hesitated, but the rune's tide turned. One by one horns clinked, unwilling perhaps, yet drawn by the gravity of Ned Stark's resurrection. When even Roose Bolton's steward swallowed wine, Ned spoke again. Tonight we rest. At first light the banners of the North ride. Send word to every river lord, to the Arryns in their eyrie, to the knights of the Green Fork and the Black. The realm's children will not freeze while their fathers bicker over gilded seats. From the rear benches a young Frey, no more than 16, rose. If winter swallows us, what guards our halls? Ned's gaze was iron. Our hearts, and the oaths we speak this day. Wan. That night, he dreamed of Bran, eyes green and glowing, perched on a limb of the heart tree, calling ravens from every corner of the sky. They came in black storms, wings beating drums of the abyss, and when they landed, they carried torches of blue-white fire. Bran touched each flame to the wall, sealing cracks with light. Ned reached for his boy but woke before their hands met. The direwolf lay across his feet, warmth radiating. Dawn's first blush lit the shutters. Catelyn slept lightly on a cushioned bench, cloak for blanket. Ned rose without waking her and stepped to the window. Beyond the courtyards, banners snapped. Gray, bear black, flayed man red, trout blue, twice towered silver. From the east, thunder of hooves beat steady, relentless. The assembled North moved as one organism, blood renewed, bone mended, sinew stretching. Ned whispered a silent plea to whatever gods watched from weirwood eyes. Grant me time, just enough to weave peace, to forge the sword that is no sword, to teach my wolf pups the song of dawn. He took up his cloak, fastened the iron wolf's head, and descended to meet the living. And in the fading dark beyond dawn, the dead stirred, tasting the heat of mustered hearts, sensing a reckoning their long slumber had promised. In caverns under the frost fangs, ice cracked. In crypts beneath forgotten castles, hands twitched. In the skies above a glacier-wound plain, something vast tilted its head and listened to the dirge wind blowing from the south. The Game of Thrones had become the war for dawn. Ned Stark, reborn beneath roots and snow, now marched at the front of a host bound by love, loss, and something fiercer still. The North remembers, yes. But at last, the North awakens. The North marched as one beneath the open sky, banners streaming above frost-bitten fields and the last stubborn embers of autumn. As the columns of men and horses wound away from the twins, they seemed less an army and more a tide, drawn northward by a force as inexorable as winter itself. No war drums beat, for it was not war that drove them now, but a calling, a gathering of houses to stand for the realm's soul against a darkness older than memory. The hosts of Stark, Mormont, Umber, Karstark, Glover, Tallheart, and all the lesser houses that still remembered the old words pressed on, every mile swallowing the old ambitions that had scattered them. There were thousands, grim warriors of the Dreadfort cloaked in red flayed man, bare islanders with axes and gritted teeth, stout crannogmen from the neck, riverlords riding beneath the trout banner, and knights of House Arryn who had ridden hard from the Eyrie to meet the host as it drew up near the ruins of Barrowton. Even the Freys, shamed and nervous, sent a small contingent to prove their loyalty. Messengers galloped ahead. Ravens fledged with secret orders, and all along the ragged march refugees flocked to the protection of the direwolf. Ned rode at the fore, Robb beside him, Catelyn close behind, the direwolves padding through snow and sodden grass. There was no throne for Ned in his return, no crown or gaudy raiment, just a plain woolen cloak clasped at the throat. The black wolf brooch, and the weight of ice reborn strapped across his back. The men at arms looked to him as if he were a banner in the flesh, proof against despair. When he spoke, his words carried across the columns, grave as midnight, gentle as snowfall. "We march not as conquerors, but as kin," he told them. "Remember every name the winter has taken, and do not waste a single death on pride or vengeance. The dead do not care for our quarrels. Let us be stronger than our fathers and stand together." Robb rode with a new calm, no longer the Wolf King starved for approval, but a son drawing strength from his father's presence. Together they planned each stage of the route, sending trusted men to the last hearth, White Harbor, Deepwood Motte, and the scattered villages too small to name on any lord's map. The news of Eddard Stark's return spread through the north like fire and dry grass, and in every hall, old men wept, maesters crossed themselves, and boys and girls gathered to touch the hand of the dead come home. But not all was hope. South of the Neck, in holdfasts still haunted by the Lion's host or the betrayal of Boltons and Freys, there were those who met the news with suspicion or outright fear. In one night, at a ruined tower, a handful of Sellswords hired by some southern lord tried to murder Ned as he passed through their camp. The attempt was clumsy and doomed. Grey Wind tore out the throat of one man before the others could draw steel, and Ned dispatched a second with the swift economy of a swordsman who has never relished killing, but does what he must. Robb was shaken, but Ned only wiped his blade and offered a prayer for men who sold their lives for copper. They crossed the neck beneath a cold blue sky. Reed men met them on the causeways, bearing spears and strange frogskin cloaks, and greeted Ned as a brother come home to the Green Lands. Howland Reed himself embraced Ned with tears in his eyes, and for a day the army rested, the Crannogmen sharing tales of the bog devils and the old magics. Mira Reed spoke quietly with Bran, who had arrived with Maester Luwin and Hodor, pale but walking, and for the first time Ned saw the mark of the three-eyed crow behind his son's gaze. Bran said little, but Ned felt the deep pools of wisdom growing there, and it frightened him. Not for Bran's sake, but for all that the North would demand from him before the end. In the quiet of the Godswood that night, Ned knelt with his children, Robb, Bran, and Rickon, who had come riding with Osha from the wilds, thin but unbroken. Together they touched the heart tree, and Ned whispered the old prayers. The words faltered, choked by tears. Yet in the wind above, he fancied he heard the rustle of ancient voices, approval from those who had watched the first Stark cross the snows, with nothing but a wolf at his side. When dawn rose, Arya came riding from the south, Angie and Lem at her side, battered but defiant. Her hair was tangled, her face bruised, but in her eyes shone the wildness of the wolf and the hunger of a girl who had crossed the world for her family. She did not weep when she saw her father. She only ran to him and clung to his side, face buried against his chest. "You're real," she whispered. He stroked her hair. "I am here, Arya. No force on earth could keep me from you." They stayed one more night at Greywater Watch, the Lords of the Neck sheltering them in green halls woven from reeds and mist. That night, around a fire, Ned listened as Bran spoke quietly to Arya, and Robb about dreams of ravens and dragons, of snowstorms that moved like armies, and a wall that bled blue fire. Bran's voice was calm and sure, older than his years. Ned felt dread settle in his gut, but he did not flinch. They pressed on toward Winterfell. The host grew larger with every mile, joined by wildlings who had fled south before the coming cold. Free folk who called Jon Snow their true lord. Tormund Giantsbane himself met them on the King's Road with 200 wild warriors, his laughter echoing down the snowy hills. At first the northern lords balked at the sight of the wildlings among their ranks, but Ned quieted them with a glance. "We are all the Night's Watch now," he said. "The wall must not fall." They reached Winterfell on a windless afternoon. The sky the color of slate. The walls were half rebuilt, smoke rising from forges and kitchens, and the ring of hammers echoed across the yard. Davos Seaworth and Lady Sansa awaited them at the gate, flanked by Manderly men and the few Stark retainers who had survived Ramsay's sack. Sansa was tall and grave, her auburn hair loose about her shoulders, her eyes shadowed by too many losses, but shining with the light of home. When she saw her father, she did not smile, but simply bowed her head and whispered, "Lord Stark." Ned embraced her tightly, heart full to breaking. Davos knelt at Ned's feet. "Winterfell is yours, my lord. I have kept it as best I could. You kept it as a true knight, Sir Davos. My thanks will never fade." And no, there was no feast, no revel, only the solemn gathering of family in the heart of the keep. That night, beneath the red leaves of the heart tree, Ned stood with his children, Catelyn, and all who would listen. Lords and wildlings, small folk and crannogmen. The snow began to fall as he spoke. "We are all one house now," he said. "We are all one blood. The wall is the last hope of the living, and it cannot stand without us. We will send all we can spare to Jon and the Watch. We will call every bannerman, every friend. Those who ride for us ride for all the world. Nay." He turned to Bran, whose eyes shone with a light not his own. "Bran, you must guide us. Tell us what you see." Bran spoke softly, voice trembling with power. "The dead are moving. The wall is cracking piece by piece. Eastwatch will fall first, soon. If we do not gather now, there will be no dawn." A murmur of fear rippled through the crowd, but Ned's voice cut through it. "We will not run. We will not bend. The North stands." In the days that followed, preparations filled Winterfell. The smiths worked night and day, reforging plowshares and old swords into new blades. Every able-bodied man and woman trained with spear and bow. The maesters sent ravens to every corner of the kingdom. Old enemies answered. The Eyrie sent steel-clad knights. White Harbor sent ships. Bear Island sent their last bears. Even the Greyjoys sent a ragged fleet. Half for pride, half for fear. The free folk worked beside Northmen in the yard, mistrust fading beneath the shadow of the coming storm. In the evenings, the family gathered in the solar, Ned and Catelyn, Robb and Sansa, Arya and Bran, Rickon and even Theon, who had come home thin and haunted, craving forgiveness. Each carried scars the others could not see, but each carried hope too. Ned spoke quietly with his sons and daughters, not as lord to vassal but as father to child. With Sansa he spoke of the weight of mercy, of ruling with a steady hand but a kind heart. With Arya he spoke of swordplay and forgiveness, of justice that knows when to sheathe the blade. With Robb he spoke of leadership, of knowing when to yield and when to stand. With Bran he listened most of all, for Bran's visions grew deeper each night, his voice full of warnings and strange wisdom. On the 7th day a raven arrived from the wall. Jon Snow's hand, terse and urgent. Eastwatch breached. The dead pour through. We fall back to the Shadow Tower. Hold the North. I ride for Winterfell. The time for waiting ended. Ned donned his armor, a simple suit of blackened steel, battered but well cared for. Robb dressed the same, ice at his back. Sansa wore a cloak of wolf gray, a dagger at her hip. Arya wore leathers and a blade, her face set like flint. Bran rode in a litter at the center of the host, summer and gray wind flanking him, eyes unblinking. The host mustered beneath Winterfell's walls. 10,000 men, 1,000 women, wildlings and Northmen, river lords and Arryn knights, all sworn now to the direwolf. At their head rode Eddard Stark, lord no longer, but guardian of the living. The march north was brutal. The snow thickened, the air freezing lashes on the skin. Still they pressed on, every mile haunted by rumors. Villages gone silent, men found frozen with terror on their faces, flocks of ravens blackening the skies at dawn. Each day Bran grew more withdrawn, his gaze fixed on some distant sight. At the last hearth, they found only ruins. The gates were splintered, the halls empty, the air thick with the stink of death. They buried the dead as best they could, and Ned wept for the lost Umbers, for all who had stood their ground against the night. He made no speeches, only a promise at the pyre. The North remembers. You will not be forgotten. Beyond last hearth, the world ended. The snows rose above the trees, the sky faded to endless gray. Scouts brought word of whites ahead, and the men steeled themselves for battle. In the dead of night, the dead attacked. hundreds of silent, blue-eyed corpses shuffling through the drifts, led by shadows on pale horses. The line held. Sansa and Arya fought beside Robb and Ned, Bran calling warnings from the rear. They lost good men, but the dead lost more, shattered by Valyrian steel and wildfire. On the second day, Jon Snow rode into camp, Ghost at his side, black cloak tattered, eyes burning with exhaustion and purpose. The reunion with Ned was brief, wordless. They embraced, and Jon knelt. "You are my father," he said. "I will follow you to the end." "You are my son," Ned replied. "Now stand and fight beside me." With Jon came the last of the Night's Watch, battered survivors of the Wall, men who had watched the end of the old world, and now clung to hope. They were greeted as brothers by the northern host. The days blurred together. March, fight, bury the dead, march again. At the shivering forest, they met the vanguard of the Night King himself. Silent ranks of whites, and a terrible cold that froze breath and hope. The first night Robb nearly died, and only Arya's quick blade saved him from a white's grasp. Sansa led the wounded to the rear, calming the terrified with steady words. Bran sat shivering, his mind traveling beyond the battlefield, seeking answers from the roots of the world. That night, beneath the stars, Ned found Bran alone, eyes glazed. "Bran," he whispered, "come back to us." Bran's voice was distant. "The heart trees are burning. The dead march on Winterfell. But there is still hope." "Nemezasuri." "What hope?" Bran's eyes cleared, and for a moment Ned saw the little boy who had once dreamed of knights and adventures. "You must call the ancient kings. You must wake the sleepers." Ned nodded, not understanding but trusting. He gathered the Stark banners. Robb, Jon, Sansa, Arya, Rickon, and all the northern lords, and led them into the Godswood. Beneath the weirwood's bloody leaves, he knelt and plunged ice into the snow. "In the name of every Stark who has died defending the North, I call on you. In the name of the first men, I call on you. In the name of my father, my sons and daughters, all the living, I call on you. Stand with us." Nirsten. The wind rose, whistling through the branches. The snow swirled. For a heartbeat nothing happened. Then the air shimmered, the leaves rustled, and the ground trembled. Shapes emerged from the dark. Old kings in shadowy armor, their faces stern and cold. They carried swords of mist and shields of frost. Bran's voice rang out, strong and strange. "The North remembers. The North fights. The North endures." The shadows bowed their heads to Ned. One by one, they touched ice and vanished into the blade. When the last king had gone, the sword glowed with a light like dawn breaking on new fallen snow. Ned rose, holding ice aloft. The host roared. Men and women, wildlings and knights, lords and free folk. When the dead came at dawn, the living were ready. Ice blazed with the strength of 1,000 years. Jon fought at Ned's side, Robb and Arya at the flanks, Sansa rallying the wounded, Bran watching over all. The battle was terrible. Snow and blood, fire and ice. But the North did not break. In the end, Ned faced the Night King beneath the heart tree, the ancient enemy's eyes burning blue. The fight was short and savage. Ice met the Night King's blade, and the force of the blow shook the world. But Ned fought with the strength of all the Starks, living and dead, and as dawn broke, he drove ice through the Night King's heart. The shadow shattered. The dead fell. Silence swept the battlefield. Ned stood, exhausted and bleeding, but alive. Around him, his family gathered, Robb, Jon, Sansa, Arya, Bran, Rickon, and Catelyn, all battered but unbowed. The North had endured. And in the new dawn, as the sun crested the horizon and light fell on the heart tree, Ned Stark knelt and gave thanks, not for victory, but for the chance to love and be loved, and to keep faith with all who had ever called him father, lord, friend. The war for the Dawn was over. The world would heal. And from that day, the North would remember not only winter, but the light that comes after. Anishawa. And Nilka. The battle was over, but the silence after was vast and aching, a hollow bell ringing across a world remade. The snow where Winterfell's godswood once whispered lay trampled, crusted brown with blood, and blackened where wildfires had swept. The dead had fallen in heaps, whites dissolving into icy dust, the White Walkers scattered as though the cold wind itself had lost its command. Sunlight, pale and timid, filtered down through smoke and frost, painting strange colors on the faces of the living as they gathered themselves, blinking and bruised and broken, but alive. Ned stood among his children, sword planted in earth, the heart tree behind him. Ice steamed faintly in the morning chill. The ancient steel marked now with faint runes, and the memory of voices that whispered through its grip. His breathing was labored. His shoulder throbbed where the Night King's blade had scored the mail. But the pain was an anchor, the weight of being present, and he clung to it fiercely. All around, men and women moved among the dead, carrying the wounded, weeping for friends, raising voices in the old songs for those gone to the gods. Robb knelt beside Jon, who sat hunched and silent, blood crusted in his hair, his cloak torn nearly in half. Arya limped among the fallen, her arms streaked with dirt and dried gore, but her eyes were clear, her chin set. Sansa, wrapped in a thick cloak of direwolf fur, knelt with the healers, binding wounds with sure hands, her quiet words gentling the dying. Catelyn had not wept, not yet. Her tears were a reservoir held back behind dam walls, but her hand never left Rickon's head, and she watched Bran, her heart in her throat. Bran sat propped against the roots of the heart tree, his breath shallow, skin ashen. The battle had cost him something deeper than wounds. He seemed far older now, the green in his eyes pale as willow leaves at first thaw. The ravens circled overhead, cawing a warning or a blessing. None could tell. Ned knelt beside Bran, his voice low. "You are with us, Bran." Bran looked up, and the corner of his mouth twitched in the shadow of a smile. "We are all here, Father, for now." He glanced toward the east, as if seeing leagues beyond the horizon. "I can feel them. Gone. All the cold. But the world is not done changing. Not yet." "Neshin?" Ned placed a hand on Bran's brow, feeling the heat of fever and something else, a quiet pulse, a power that had carried them all to this dawn. "Rest now, son. The living need you whole." A murmur passed through the crowd as the dead were counted, and the living assembled. Lords gathered, banners lowered in mourning and respect. Lady Mormont, barely standing, gave her last orders before collapsing into the arms of her sworn shield. Glover's men moved among the wildlings, clapping shoulders, binding wounds without question of friend or foe. Tormund Giantsbane grinned through broken teeth, his laughter booming as he found Jon in the crowd and swept him into a bear hug. "You stubborn crow, you did it, you and this lot." He nodded at the Starks. "Ain't never seen the like. Half the North, half the free folk, and a pack of ghosts making the world new. If we're all alive come supper, I'll start a song that'll crack the wall again." Jon smiled, exhaustion softening the grief in his eyes. "There's no wall left to crack, Tormund." "Eh, well." Tormund clapped him harder. "We'll build a new one, out of stories and songs." Nedim Tovs Bagagana. As the light grew, survivors from the Night's Watch gathered in their tattered black faces hollow, but eyes bright. The last Lord Commander limped forward, an old man with one eye and half a nose. His voice gruff but steady. "Lord Stark, we await your word." Ned straightened. "There is no more watch and no more wall. There is only the living, and we must hold fast together, north and south. We will bury the dead and build anew." The old man nodded, and the watch dispersed, folding into the host of the north. Throughout the morning, the lords and ladies of the realm assembled in the ruined Great Hall, its roof shattered, walls scorched. Winterfell's stones, battered by years of war and fire, still stood. Ned called the assembly with no throne, no crown. He wore his plain wool cloak, and ice rested across his knees. The direwolves prowled at the edges, their presence a reminder that the old gods still watched. "My lords and ladies," Ned began, voice ragged but resonant, "we have survived the night. The enemy that would have ended the world is gone, for now. But the realm we inherit is wounded. There will be those who seek to return to old ways, old wounds, Old feuds. We cannot allow it. Mandatory TV. The assembly was silent, faces lined with grief, hope, and fear. Lady Sansa stepped forward, her bearing calm and queenly. "We must remember what saved us," she said. "Not banners, not blood, but unity. The North will open its gates to all who seek peace. We will feed the hungry, heal the wounded, and restore what was lost, together, or not at all." Arya spoke next, her words blunt. "Any lord or lady who seeks to break this peace will answer to me. To all of us." Her hand rested on Needle, and the threat was plain. Jon rose, Ghost beside him, and his voice was softer than the others, but fierce. "We know now what lies beyond death. Let us not squander what the living have fought for. The wall is gone. The old lines are gone. There is only use together." One by one, the lords and ladies swore anew, not just fealty to Winterfell, but to the peace, the unity that had seen them through the long night. The oaths were plain, spoken in the old tongue and the common. To protect the living, to remember the dead, and to keep the North whole. As the assembly broke, Ned found himself surrounded by his children. Sansa hugged him, tears slipping at last. Robb grinned through split lips. Arya nudged him with her shoulder. Rickon stared wide-eyed at the direwolves. And Jon lingered, looking for something in Ned's face. "What now?" Jon asked. Ned's reply was gentle. "We rebuild. We forgive where we can. We watch, always, for the darkness that might rise again." Jon nodded. "And if it does, then the pack endures," Ned said. "As it always has." Erdogan. The days that followed were a blur of labor and healing. Every hour brought new arrivals, refugees from burned villages, southern knights who had cast off their banners, even a handful of Lannister men who claimed they had seen the dead with their own eyes and wished for nothing but peace. Sansa organized the kitchens and the stores, turning Winterfell into a center for the desperate. Robb led work gangs to repair the walls, his laughter echoing over the yard as he barked orders and praise alike. Arya rode with the scouts, chasing off bands of brigands and lending a sword where needed. Catelyn found herself in the role of healer and counselor, tending the grieving, resolving feuds with quiet words and the occasional stern warning. Rickon shadowed the direwolves, learning their ways, slipping through the woods with a wild ease none could match. Bran spent his days at the Heart Tree, silent, eyes distant. Sometimes ravens flocked around him, and those who passed said he spoke with voices not his own. Jon took it upon himself to lead parties north, searching for survivors, burying the fallen, and putting down any remnants of the Whites. At the edge of the haunted forest, he met a party of wildlings led by Val, the wildling princess, and together they brokered a peace between the last free folk and the Northmen. It was not always easy. Old hatreds flared, and more than one meeting ended with drawn knives. But the memory of the long night was still fresh, and even the most stubborn could be swayed by the need for shelter and food. As the months passed, the wounds of war began to close. The first flowers broke through the snow, stubborn and bright. Winterfell's walls rose anew, stronger for the scars. The rivers ran clear, and the fields, though scorched, promised a crop come summer. But not all was simple healing. News from the south trickled in, word that King's Landing was in chaos, the throne empty after a coup led by the common folk. Cersei Lannister was dead, trampled beneath a mob's boots, and the gold cloaks had scattered. The Iron Islands, sensing weakness, raided the western coasts, and Dorne declared for independence, shutting its gates to all comers. The realm was broken, the old order swept away. Ned gathered his family in the solar and laid out the grim tidings. "The world is remade," he said, "but it is not at peace. If we do not guide the dawn, someone else will seize the light." Robb wanted to march south, to restore order. Sansa counseled patience. Winterfell's strength lay in its unity, not in conquest. Arya, ever restless, offered to ride as an envoy, to seek out allies and see what could be salvaged of the realm. Bran only watched, quiet and knowing. In the end, it was Bran who spoke the answer. Send ravens. Call a great council, not of kings but of the people. Lords and ladies, knights and small folk, even wildlings. Let them come to Winterfell and see what peace can look like. If we build something new, it must be for all. Yes. Ned listened and agreed. Letters went out on every wind, and word spread across the shattered kingdoms. A council in the north. All welcome who would speak for the living. Wind. Summer returned to the north, slow and cautious, like a deer stepping into a clearing. By the time the first delegates arrived, Winterfell was green with new growth, the air full of the scent of lilacs and the hum of bees. They came from everywhere, knights of the Reach in battered armor, fishermen from White Harbor, wildling elders, Dornish lords with banners of gold and red, even men from the Stormlands, each carrying hope and fear in equal measure. The council gathered in the open air, beneath the heart tree whose leaves had turned again, a riot of red and gold. There was no throne, only benches set in a circle, a fire at the center for warmth and comfort. Ned sat with his children, Catelyn at his side, Sansa and Arya flanking him, Robb, Jon and Bran to the other. The other leaders assembled, no man or woman placed above another. The debates were fierce. Old feuds smoldered. Tarlys would not sit beside wildlings. The Ironborn spat on the council's oaths. The Dornish threatened to ride home at the first slight. But Sansa's calm, Arya's resolve, and Jon's measured fairness helped keep the peace. Ned spoke little, but his presence commanded respect, and when he did speak, it was with the steady wisdom of a man who had seen the end of the world and would not see it return. Out of days and nights of council emerged a new order. The kingdoms would remain, but their ties would be those of peace, not conquest. The North would be free, as would Dorne and the Iron Islands, but each would swear to aid the others in time of need. A council would meet every year, a pact of mutual defense and open trade. Justice would be meted not by sword alone, but by assembly, with voices from every class and corner. There were protests, but hope was stronger. The people, small folk and highborn, had seen too much death to crave another war. Slowly, the vision of a realm united in survival rather than power took hold. When the council ended, Sansa was chosen as the Lady of Winterfell, her wisdom and patience making her the North's first ruler in her own right. Robb and Arya rode south, charged with keeping the peace along the borderlands. Jon took the Black again, not as a penance but as warden of the far north, tasked with keeping watch for threats beyond the living free folk and Northmen beside him. Bran stayed at Winterfell, his mind wandering the winds and woods, a quiet guardian of old magic. Ned retired from rule, his wounds too deep for further battle. He spent his days walking the Godswood, tending to the children who came seeking tales of the long night, or working in the fields with those who rebuilt. Catelyn joined him, her heart at peace for the first time in years. The years passed. Children were born, marriages made. The fields grew heavy with grain, the forests thick with game. The scars of war never fully vanished, but they faded beneath new growth. In his last days, Ned would sit beneath the heart tree, ice laid across his knees, and tell the story of that final winter to all who would listen, of the darkness that came for the world, of the unity that broke it, and of the dawn that followed. And so the North remembered, not only winter but the hope that follows, and the lesson that even in the darkest night, the pack endures. The dawn broke slow and golden above Winterfell, spilling light over the mists and into the courtyards where children played among new grass and the distant echo of hammers rang on stone. The scars of war had not faded, yet there was life, laughter, singing, the smell of baking bread drifting from the kitchens. The pack endured. The North endured. Ned Stark was an old man before the world called him old, hair now a solid frost, his face deeply lined, his stride measured by aches that spoke of every battle, every grief, every hour spent riding against darkness. Yet in these years, he found peace for the first time since boyhood. and peace was a labor worthy of any sword. He walked Winterfell's walls each morning, pausing to greet the sentries, always stopping at the broken stones where the first breach had come in the long night. There, he knelt, pressing his palm to the granite, feeling the memory of cold, and offered a silent thanks for those who would never see another sunrise. Robb and Arya had become legends, their names carried on wind and water far to the south and across the narrow sea. Robb rode the southern marches, a lord without a castle, binding oaths with hand and word, wielding peace as deftly as once he wielded war. His wife was a knight's daughter from the Riverlands, and their children were fierce and laughing, wild as the grass. Arya never lingered in one place. Sometimes, a raven would arrive from Old Town, or even from beyond the shivering sea, bearing news of her. A wolf's head marked in ink on the vellum, a single word: home. When she came, she sat by the fire, told stories that made Rickon howl with glee, and then, always she was gone again, seeking the edge of the world. Bran was the quiet heart of the North, rarely seen beyond the Godswood, but known by every child and peasant who sought his counsel. In time, even the southern lords sent their heirs to study the old ways at Winterfell, learning to honor the land, to listen to the wind in the weirwoods, to treat with the free folk who had become neighbors, not foes. Sansa ruled with wisdom, her counsel drawn from every corner of the realm. Northmen and Crannogmen, wildlings, even Ironborn. Her word was law, yet her law was gentler than any that had come before, for she judged by truth, not pride. She bore no crown, but in the eyes of her people, she was the queen in the north. Jon Snow remained in the far north, ranging with Ghost and the free folk, keeping watch beyond the remains of the wall. His hair was streaked with white now, his eyes full of distance. But when he came to Winterfell, he brought laughter and tales of the dancing lights above the Skagosi Sea, of giants glimpsed at dusk, of wild places where the world still dreamed. His love for his family was never spoken, but always present. An embrace, a nod, a glance across a crowded hall that said, "I am here." Catelyn lived long and well, her grief softened by grandchildren and the warmth of a realm she had helped to save. She taught the songs of the South to northern children, tended the sick with gentle hands, and in her last years found forgiveness for herself and for all those whose choices had been made in fear. Rickon grew like a sapling after a hard winter, quick, stubborn, a hunter, a master of hounds and horses, beloved by the small folk and feared by any who would bring harm to the north. He was wild as summer storm, and Ned, seeing the boy ride the moors with shaggy hair streaming and Wolf running at his heels, felt the past and the future in a single heartbeat. The world beyond Winterfell changed as well, but slowly, as all living things must. The council at Winterfell became an annual gathering, a festival of song and debate, of oaths sworn and friendships kindled. Dorne sent wine and oranges. The Riverlands sent grain. The Iron Islands sent pearls, and a wary, fierce loyalty. The free folk traded furs and stories, and in return, the North offered land, justice, and peace. The Reach, slowest to trust, sent its sons and daughters to study, and when a plague swept the south, it was healers from Winterfell who rode first to aid them. Once, a ship arrived from across the sea, its captain seeking the truth of the stories whispered in the markets of Braavos and Volantis, that in Westeros the dead had risen and been cast down by a lord who had walked out of death's shadow. Ned met the man by the broken tower, offered bread and salt, and listened as the captain told him of unrest in the east, of old magic stirring, of dragons glimpsed on the horizon. "We have fought our war for the dawn," Ned said quietly, "but others will come. That is the way of the world." The captain nodded, understanding, and sailed on. The world would never be free of shadow, but now, at least, there were those willing to stand in the light. As the years passed, the faces around Ned changed. Friends died, children grew, and grandchildren's laughter filled the halls. The old stories were told and retold. How the Starks had risen, how peace had been forged in fire and sorrow, how the North had remembered and endured. One autumn night, as the first frost crept over the windows and the fires burned bright in the great hall, Ned called his family to him. Sansa and Robb, Arya and Bran, Rickon, Jon, their children and those who called Winterfell home, all gathered to hear him speak. "I am an old man," he began, and a ripple of protest passed through the room. But he raised a hand. "I have lived to see what I once thought impossible. A world remade, not by kings or swords, but by love and by sacrifice. You are my legacy, not the walls of this keep or the lands that bear our name, but the lives you will lead, the peace you will keep, the children you will teach. Remember the darkness, but more, remember the dawn." He passed ice to Robb, then to Jon, then to each in turn, and at last laid it across his knees. "We endure not because we are strong, but because we stand together. That is the lesson of the North and of my life. When the darkness comes again, as it must, remember this: stand together." They sat late into the night, telling stories, sharing memories, laughing and weeping as one. Arya sang a song from Braavos. Sansa wove a tale of an island queen who defeated winter with a single flower. Robb told a story of a wolf so clever it outwitted death. And Bran, at last, spoke of the dreams that bind all living things. Later, alone beneath the heart tree, Ned knelt one last time. The wind was soft, the leaves whispering secrets. He closed his eyes and felt the presence of those who had gone before. Lyanna Benjen, even his father, mother, and the long line of Starks who had guarded these stones. He did not ask for more days, only for the strength to finish them with honor. He passed in his sleep that winter, with Catelyn at his side, the fire burning low, and the first snow falling outside the window. The news spread slowly, not with trumpets, but with the hush of grief and gratitude. Winterfell's bells tolled for 7 days, and across the realm, from the Wall to the Greenblood, men and women stopped to remember the man who had brought peace to a broken world. He was buried in the crypts beneath the keep, among the kings of winter and the queens of the north. The procession stretched for miles, banners lowered, voices raised in the old songs. At the grave, Bran laid a single red leaf, Arya a small stone, Sansa a ring of wildflowers. Jon, kneeling, promised to keep watch, always. Robb spoke the words of the old tongue, and Rickon howled with his wolf as the stones were sealed. The years passed. New wars rose and faded, old wounds healed and sometimes reopened, but the North endured. The council at Winterfell became a legend, studied in distant cities, remembered in the halls of kings and the huts of peasants. Children spoke the name Stark with pride and with hope. Sometimes when the wind blew from the north, and the stars glittered on a night of new fallen snow, those who wandered in the Godswood swore they heard a voice, deep and calm, carried in the rustle of leaves and the whisper of the wind. "Remember," it seemed to say. "Remember and endure." So the story was passed from father to son, mother to daughter, friend to friend, for as long as the North stood. And though winter always came again, it was met by those who remembered, who loved, and who endured. And in the end, that was enough. Key. Spring returned to the North in a slow hush, an old memory reborn. The ice in the lakes melted in glassy trickles, the snows receded from the black earth, and Crocus and Wolf's Bane burst in drifts along the edge of Winterfell's crumbling moat. The wars in the winter had left scars everywhere, in shattered towers, in the hush that sometimes stole through the great hall, in the fields where bones surfaced each thaw. Yet each morning children ran in the yard, laughter and shrieks, echoing beneath banners of direwolf gray. The past was always present, but it had become a tale woven through the days, not the weight that crushed them. In those years after Eddard Stark's death, his children and his grandchildren remade the North by hand and heart. Sansa's reign as Lady of Winterfell had become legend even before her first decade passed. She ruled not by iron, but by law and story, holding open court beneath the old weirwood, listening to the grievances of lord and peasant alike. She wore no crown. The clasp at her throat was a brooch shaped as a single red leaf, the badge of the old gods and the new peace. She kept to the ancient ways. Her small folk always had food in famine. Her justice was swift but merciful, and her bannermen swore fealty with pride, not fear. The folk called her the Queen of Spring, and with her grew the custom that the first plowing and the last harvest feast would be led by Sansa in person, her cloak dusted with pollen, her hands deep in the earth. Her brother Robb rode the wild frontiers, a shadow to the realms east and south. Where raiders struck or old hatreds flared, Robb's presence cooled the blood. He would speak to lords and outlaws alike, listening as Eddard had listened, but never tolerating cruelty or betrayal. His sword was peace, but his temper was winter. Quick, sometimes sudden, always cold at the core. He became, without ever claiming it, the shield of the borderlands, a legend children used to frighten away dreams of war. Arya, forever restless, was the North's swift messenger and the realm's secret guardian. She rode to the furthest watchtowers, slipped from shadow to shadow along the coasts, and each year disappeared for moons at a time, always returning when needed most. She trained the girls and boys of Winterfell in the dance of swords, and her face grew harder each year, but her laughter was the wildest of any. When old enemies sent knives in the night or whisperers spread fear, Arya found them and offered a choice: live for the dawn or flee the north forever. Bran, the Greenseer, watched over the land as the roots watched over the forest floor. He spent years beneath the boughs, his mind wandering far and wide. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his word was treated as prophecy. In time he gathered around him a circle of the wise and the odd, a maester who had studied at the Citadel, and then in the wild, a wildling girl who had spoken with the children of the forest, and even a crippled lord from the far east, who had seen the ghosts of Valyria with his own eyes. Bran's circle, as they came to be known, taught those who would listen the old ways and the new, how to see the signs of blight in the trees, how to treat wounds with moss and honey, how to find lost things in dreams. The knowledge saved countless lives, crops that would have failed, sicknesses stopped before they could spread, fires averted by reading the winds. The North's wisdom became renowned, and even maesters from the south journeyed north for learning. Jon Snow, ever the watcher on the wall, rebuilt the Night's Watch as a brotherhood, not of castaways, but of volunteers. Boys and girls came from the north and the free folk, some even from the distant south, seeking the harsh purpose of the far north. The wall itself was gone, its stones tumbled and scattered, but the Black Cloaks patrolled the haunted forest, keeping peace and learning its secrets. Jon made peace with the giants, led wildlings to plant trees and raise new villages, and stood with the Starks at every council. He never married, but there were tales of his love, a free folk woman, or a witch of Skagos, or a quiet healer from the south. In time, Jon's name became a byword for lonely honor, and his memory haunted the snowfields for generations. Rickon, the youngest, grew into a lord wild as the woods. He ruled the lands west of Winterfell, and the people there grew tough and unruly, stubborn in their freedom but fiercely loyal. Rickon raised great hounds and wolves, and men swore they sometimes saw him running the forest with his beasts, lost in the wild joy of youth. His line would become the most unpredictable of the North, sending forth hunters and explorers who would map the white waste beyond the Bay of Seals. Catelyn's twilight years were filled with the quiet joys of hearth and kin. She taught her daughters and granddaughters the art of peacemaking, taught the young lords how to speak with those below their station. She tended the sick and the grieving, and every year led the women of Winterfell in the planting of the heart tree's seedlings, spreading the old god's roots across the north. The free folk, once mistrusted and feared, became neighbors and kin. Their ways crept into northern custom. Songs with wild, strange chords, stories told around the fire, marriages pledged by shared blood and bread. Some took lands, some wandered still, but all were counted as part of the realm. Tormund Giantsbane lived to an enormous old age, regaling the children with tales of giants and of Jon Snow, whom he always claimed was half wolf and half crow. Trade with the south returned, cautious at first, then bold. The Iron Islands sent wool and salt fish. The Riverlands sent grain. Dorne sent sweet wines and citrus. There was friction, always, occasional raids or a greedy merchant. But the council at Winterfell, now an institution, settled grievances before they festered. Every 5 years, a great festival was held, and men and women came from every corner of Westeros to feast beneath the blooming weirwoods, to race their horses on the moors, to swear new pacts of peace and trade. There were threats, always, bandits in the hills, whispers of dragons in the east, omens of strange storms in the far south. But the north was ready. Each time danger rose, the Starks sent ravens, the bannermen assembled, and the pack endured. In time, Sansa aged as her father had, her hair silvered, her eyes deep and wise. She sat in the solar with her closest friends and her grandchildren, teaching them to read and to judge and to dream. She told them stories of Eddard Stark, the man who had returned from death and ended the long night not with a sword, but with a promise kept and a family reunited. On the longest night of winter, with snow swirling in blue drifts against the windows, Sansa gathered her family in the hall. There was Robb's daughter, fierce and clever. Arya's boy, with a laugh like thunder and a heart like steel. Bran's adopted sons, quiet as ghosts. Rickon's wild pack, half children, half wolves. Jon's chosen heir, a girl with dark eyes and a talent for peace. Sansa spoke, her voice soft as snow. You are the hope of the North. We have seen the world broken, and we have made it whole. Remember, always, what it cost. Remember that we survive because we stand together. When the world grows cold again, and it will, remember the pack endures. Lebaron. That night, she dreamed of Ned beneath the heart tree, his face peaceful, the sword ice lying across his knees. He smiled, and the godswood was bright with summer's gold. Sansa woke before dawn, tears on her cheeks, but her heart full. She died with the first snows of a gentle winter, the North alive with memory and hope. Time flowed forward. Children grew, old heroes faded, and the tales of the Night King's fall, of Ned Stark's return, became part of the song of the land. The council grew, changed, and in time, the South sent its own envoys, eager for wisdom. Great halls rose again at Moat Cailin and White Harbor. The wall was never rebuilt, but beacon towers ringed the far north. The weirwoods spread, their roots deepening in rich soil, their leaves a canopy above every village. Peace lasted for a generation, then another. There were skirmishes, dark winters, but never again a night so long as the one broken by Ned's return. Even when a Targaryen claimant landed on the storm-lashed shores of the Vale, demanding allegiance, the North stood firm, sending envoys, not armies, and peace held. The council's wisdom became the envy of distant lands, and in Braavos and Pentos, children played at being the Starks of the North, chasing away imaginary winters. At Winterfell, the crypts grew deeper. New tombs added each generation, the statues carved in likeness, not in pride. The lords and ladies buried there were remembered not only for their swords, but for the worlds they had rebuilt. In the twilight years of the fourth generation, Bran's last student, a girl who had seen every corner of the world in dream, gathered the children in the godswood. This tree, she said, placing her hand on the ancient bark, remembers every word, every hope, every sorrow. So must we. The world will always change. Shadows will always rise. But if we hold to each other, if we hold to each other, if we hold to what we know is right, we endure. The wind blew through the leaves, scattering red and gold. The children listened, and the story became theirs. And so it was in the North that the memory of Ned Stark and his children, and the long night that changed the world, lived on, not as a shadow, but as a dawn that returned, year after year, promising that every winter has an end, and every family, united, endures. The tale passed from fire to fire, from heart to heart, shaping the world for as long as the stones of Winterfell stood and the heart trees remembered. And when winter came again, as it always would, the pack was ready. Away. The seasons turned. The north watched as the old wounds softened under the moss and new leaves, as rivers found their song again, and wildflowers stitched color over broken battlefields where only ghosts had lingered. Life returned in fits and starts. 2 steps forward, 1 in memory's shadow, for nothing so shattered as Westeros could heal without ache. Yet heal it did, drawn on by the stubborn hope Eddard Stark had reignited and his children had kindled to flame. Winterfell flourished, the stone of its towers repaired by hands both noble and humble. New halls rose from the foundations of the shattered, built wider to shelter a people now more diverse and bold. In the mornings, the Bailey teemed with apprentices from the Reach, wildlings from the Frostfangs, free folk who had planted roots, iron-born children wrestling with northern pups under the bright banners of peace. The air was always laced with the bite of wood smoke and fresh bread, with the clang of steel, not for war, but for plow and trade. Cattle lowed beyond the palisade. In the green of the godswood, the heart tree spread new boughs each year, a living memory of all the stories whispered beneath its leaves. Sansa's council was a living institution. Its benches were rarely empty, its debates ranging from grain tariffs and river rights to the proper division of honey and the matter of sheep that trespassed too far. The North had never known such unity, but it was not an easy thing. Stubborn lords, proud wildling chieftains, and southern traders all pressed their causes, and Sansa listened to each with the patience of stone. Her word was steady, never cruel, never soft for the sake of peace alone. When a verdict must be harsh, she meted it herself, and when mercy was called for, she offered it with her own hands. She was as feared as she was loved. With age, her beauty grew into something deeper, calm and enduring, the living spirit of Winterfell. Her siblings carried that spirit into every corner of the realm. Robbed sons and daughters led border keeps and river crossings, teaching the old ways with new wisdom, wary but open-handed. The wolf banners rode further south than ever before, not as conquerors but as peacebringers and judges, their oaths sworn to unity, not to vengeance. Arya became a legend, a song sung by children and grown men in every tongue from Skagos to Dorne. She was a shadow at every turning point, a girl with a sword of sunlight, a woman who rode a storm's edge, a mentor to orphans and wildlings, and would-be knights. Tales grew around her as thick as moss, that she had once sailed beyond the end of the world, that she'd worn the faces of men and queens, that the ghosts of her enemies walked behind her, quiet as a falling feather. She denied every story but lived all of them, and when she returned to Winterfell for a season, she brought laughter and the wild wind with her. Bran's circle endured as a quiet force, weaving magic and knowledge into the heart of the North. The old ways returned, reshaped by new learning. Maesters and greenseers, healers and wise women, all teaching the children what it meant to listen to the world. Bran himself faded from public life, walking in dreams as often as in flesh, guiding the North from the green shadows. He was seen at every council, but sometimes only in the eyes of a raven or the curl of smoke above the heart tree. Jon Snow remained the mythic figure at the world's edge, a watcher, a peacemaker, sometimes a judge for disputes no one else could settle. The free folk named him brother. The North called him the last wolf. His hair silvered, his eyes grew keen, and he taught each new generation that strength without kindness was but another form of cold. He wrote often to Sansa and Arya, sent word to the council through his chosen successor, a black-cloaked girl with laughter like bells and a gaze as hard as the walls vanished stone. Rickon's wild pack grew with every year. His halls were open to any who wandered, his woods a haven for the lost and the orphaned. It was said that he could speak with wolves, that he knew every bird's song and every brook's course by heart. He fathered a great, unruly brood, boys and girls with wild hair and fierce eyes, who brought new stories to every corner of the land. The council at Winterfell expanded with each passing year, and with it, the reach of peace. The southern lords, seeing the North's prosperity and the council's wisdom, sent more envoys, sometimes seeking advice, sometimes trade, sometimes sanctuary from strife. Men and women of all nations came, Bravasi merchants, Rhoynish gardeners, even the wary Tyrells and Martells. The old rivalries softened as children played together under the banners of their mothers and fathers. The North's harvest grew rich, for every hand was needed, every mouth fed. There were troubles, as there always are. Famine threatened twice, and both times the council sent out the call for aid, and grain ships came from White Harbor, gold from the Reach, salted fish from the Iron Islands. Once, a great fire swept the lower town, but the people fought it as one, rebuilding together. Bandits crept out of the western hills, exiles from southern wars, but found little purchase in a land where every village stood ready and every child carried the tales of how the North had endured. When dragons were rumored in the east, Sansa sent a raven to Braavos, a letter of friendship and warning, an invitation to speak before swords were drawn. The council debated late into the night. In the end, it was Arya who sailed east, carrying the North's greeting and its threat. A promise of peace. A promise of steel, if peace were broken. The dragons never came to Westeros, and Arya returned with a dagger of carved bone and stories of distant cities, golden and strange. The free folk, for their part, never lost their wildness but learned the uses of peace. Their leaders joined the council, their wisdom and boldness lending strength to every season's plan. Each spring, a great festival was held where the new and old blended, songs in the old tongue, contests of strength and skill, stories traded around vast fires. Bonds of marriage and brotherhood bound the North and free folk tighter with every year. A century passed in the counting of seasons. The Starks endured, sometimes diminished, sometimes in ascendancy, always the heart of a world remade. The council's seat was expanded until it was a city unto itself, a place where anyone might plead a case, learn a craft, or find shelter from the world's storms. The gods would spread as well. Saplings planted in every yard and village, a living network that bound the land in green memory. Legends arose. The children of Arya and Jon's line rode beyond the edge of the map, bringing word of unknown islands and distant kings. Rickon's descendants became famed for their mastery of wolves and for the wild feasts that drew folk from as far as the Summer Isles. Bran's teachings shaped new schools and colleges, blending magic with learning in ways no other land dared attempt. Sansa's line ruled the North with a wisdom remembered for generations, her legacy living not only in blood, but in law and mercy. On the anniversary of Eddard's passing, the pack gathered beneath the Heart Tree. The crypts below Winterfell were filled with the statues of those who had shaped the age: Sansa in her court robes, Arya with sword and mask, Robb with open hand and armored heart, Jon with his wolf and watchful gaze, Rickon wild-eyed, Bran carved into the very roots of the tree. It became custom for the children of every house, noble and humble, to touch these statues, to offer a prayer or a story, a promise or a dream. There was no lord above the rest, no queen above the council, only the enduring family, and the people whose lives they had made possible. The song of the North grew, generation by generation, a harmony of new and old, of loss and hope, of change embraced and sorrow remembered. Each winter returned with its own threat, but never again did the darkness reign unchecked, for the lesson of Eddard's return, of the war he ended and the unity he forged, outlived him by 1,000 years. On a cold dawn many ages later, a girl with stark eyes, dark and unyielding, walked through the Godswood. She knelt at the Heart Tree, as countless before her had, and placed her hand upon its trunk. She did not pray for peace. She had inherited it. She did not pray for strength. She was born to it. Instead, she whispered, "Let me be worthy of what they gave." Above her, the leaves rustled, red and wise. A breeze curled through the Grinwood, carrying with it voices of 1,000 years, and the stories of the pack who had endured, shaping the world from shadow into dawn. And the girl stood, the future opening before her, the past at her back, and the promise of the North alive in every step she took. The pack endures.